Before the sun crept over the red mesas, the warrior sensed something amiss in his hoo-han. Air carried a whisper of silk and fear, foreign to the scent of juniper smoke and worn leather that usually greeted him each dawn. He moved quietly, senses sharpened by years of hardship and ceremony, heart beating in a steady drum toward the entrance. Was this a trick of the night, a dream born of too many moons spent guarding the edge of his people's land? Or was someone truly there, seeking refuge in his home? He pushed aside the worn hide covering and found her curled like a bird in flight, golden hair spread across a blanket of woven patterns, tiny breath tremors marking each rise and fall of her chest. Her dress, too fine, too fragile, lay in gentle disarray, as if she had shed layers of a captive life moments before. Who was she, and why had she come to his door? Questions thrummed through him, yet before his warrior's caution could fully awaken, compassion claimed him. He knelt, careful not to startle her, and placed a hand on her shoulder. The warmth beneath his palm startled her awake. Eyes wide with both relief and terror met his gaze. They were the color of storm clouds gathering at twilight, fierce yet vulnerable. In that instant, their souls recognized one another. Two beings adrift in a harsh world, linked by fate. Can a heart so hardened by battle soften in a single heartbeat? "My name is Yaji," she whispered, voice barely more than the rustle of dried leaves. "They left me. I have nowhere else to go." Yaji, a name like wind through the canyons. It rolled in his mind as he lifted her gently to her feet. He offered her a cup of water from a clay vessel and a cloth warmed by embers. Each sip steadied her. Each breath eased her fear. How many times had he offered water to strangers passing through his land? Many, but none had ever stayed behind in silence until dawn. As the first faint glow painted the sky, he wrapped a woolen blanket around her shoulders. She shivered, both from cold and from the weight of her flight. He noticed the faded stain on her dress and the bruise across her collarbone, evidence of a life she'd fled. Fury rose in him at the thought of whoever had harmed her. Could he channel that rage into a vow of protection? She sat at the edge of his sleeping mat, head bowed. He spoke little, letting silence bridge the gap between them. Morning light filtered through the Hogan's doorway, tracing patterns on the earthen floor. Outside, the desert awoke. Coyotes howled in greeting, ravens called to each other, and the wind lifted dust in golden swirls. Inside, they existed in a bubble of quiet understanding. "I cannot stay," she said after a long pause, voice trembling as though each word was a step across broken glass. "They'll come for me." He reached for a ribbon at her waist, a piece of cloth embroidered with symbols of her family lineage, now torn in places. "They will not find you here," he said. In his words lay a command stronger than any warrior's shout. His Hagan stood alone on this sweep of land, hidden among twisted juniper and ochre rocks. Who would think to search here? She lifted her eyes, meeting his promise with grateful tears. And in that moment, his heart, so accustomed to the discipline of war, recognized a new calling. What if this stranger became more than someone he protected? What if she became a reason to live beyond the battles? He rose, gathering wood for the morning fire, letting purpose blaze within him. As flames danced, he prepared a simple meal, roasted squash, corn cakes, and a stew of wild onions and rabbit. He watched her eat, each bite reclaiming strength she thought lost forever. In her small nods of thanks, he heard echoes of hope. When the sun's warmth filled the Hagan, he led her outside, across the scrubby plain toward the arroyo, where an aged elder, his aunt, dwelled. The elder's eyes, wise as the canyon walls, studied Yazi with calm scrutiny. Wordlessly, she offered water and herbal salves to soothe the bruise on Yazi's shoulder. The elder's presence was an anchor, grounding the bride-to-be in ceremonies older than any blade of grass. "I will speak with the ancestors," the elder murmured, voice like wind through reed. "Listen to their guidance." In the hush of the morning, the three of them sat before a small fire, smoke rising in ribbons to join the sky. The elder chanted softly, her hands weaving patterns in the air. Yazi closed her eyes, tears streaking down her cheeks as she begged forgiveness for the shame she thought she carried. When the ritual ended, the elder laid a hand on the warrior's shoulder. "A union blessed before dawn cannot be undone," she declared. The warrior's jaw tightened. The words sank deep, an ancient decree. When two souls unite under the first light, they share a bond as enduring as the land itself. Yazi opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. Her hand trembled as she reached for his. "I don't know the way of your people," she said, voice frail but determined, "but I trust you." "Then we will walk it together," he replied, voice firm as stone. What began as a chance encounter now stood on the brink of a lifetime vow. Could a warrior sworn to defend his tribe abandon the solitude of his path to guide another? His heart knew the answer before his mind did. They walked side by side toward the sacred mesa, where the sun had risen fully, casting the earth in brilliant gold. Elders and kin gathered, faces lined with curiosity and warmth. No questions needed be asked. The signs had been clear to those who watched from the shadows. He took Yazi's hand, raising it to his lips. In that act lay both promise and courage. Before the circle of witnesses, the warrior spoke her name and offered her a woven ring of turquoise and bone. She accepted, placing one of her delicate fingers through it. "With this, I bind my spirit to yours," he said, voice echoing against the canyon walls. The words were simple, yet carried the weight of countless generations. Yazi lifted a voice that trembled like a newborn colt finding its legs. "With this, I give you my heart, my home, my all." Tears glistened on her lashes, catching sunlight like morning dew. The elder raised her arms, blessing the union. Wind swirled dust at their feet, as though the earth itself rejoiced. In that moment, the abandoned bride became a wife. The warrior became her protector and partner, and two solitary souls merged into one. As they turned to face the rising sun together, hearts pounding with new dreams, a question hung in the air. What could tomorrow's dawn bring for two people who had defied fear and embraced hope before light even broke? And so their story began at the edge of darkness and dawn, bound by love, resilience, and the promise of shared tomorrows. A story that would echo as long as the red rocks stood watch over the land. Dawn light had barely kissed the canyon walls when they set out together, Yazi leaning on his strong arm as they walked toward the place where sky met rock. Each footstep echoed his promise. He would carry her through anything. Her heart still fluttered with the wonder of belonging, yet fear lingered at the edges. Would she ever truly fit within a world so different from the one she'd fled? They climbed the narrow ledges that led to the plateau above, the warrior moving with confident grace while Yazi followed, trusting his steady pace. When she stumbled on loose shale, he caught her with an easy sweep of his arm, drawing her close enough to feel the steady rhythm of his breath. Warmth flowed from his chest, grounding her trembling nerves. Here, between earth and sky, she found courage she never knew she possessed. The clan awaited them at the ceremonial spring, where waters clear as glass pooled between stones, worn smooth by centuries of devotion. Women in embroidered dresses stood in a half circle, their eyes alive with gentle scrutiny. Men in feathered headdresses watched with solemn pride. The elder who had performed their blessing yesterday stood again by the water's edge, palm resting on a carved staff that bore the totem of the coyote. As they approached, Yazi's pulse thundered in her ears. She thought of her past, the locked door behind her, the men who had taken her freedom, the nights spent huddled in darkness, believing hope was forever lost. But here, standing beside her husband, she felt those chains fall away one by one. Her fingers brushed the water's surface, and she saw her reflection rippling alongside his, a promise that they would face life's currents united. The elder began another chant, softer this time, a lullaby sung to the land itself. Yazi closed her eyes, letting the melody wrap around her like a shawl. In the cadence of ancient words, she felt the weight of her history lighten. When the song ended, she opened her eyes to find the men of the tribe had come forward, each offering gifts: a pouch of sacred corn for fertility of body and spirit, a polished arrow for strength in adversity, a woven sash for the journey of life. Yazi accepted each, gratitude and resolve mingling in her gaze. Later, as the sun climbed high, they sat beneath a lone juniper to share a feast of roasted lamb, blue corn tortillas, wild berries, and cactus fruit. Laughter drifted on the breeze, children chasing each other among the rocks, elders recounting tales of heroism and sacrifice. Yazi tasted freedom in every bite, realizing that family was more than blood. It was a web of trust and care woven through shared moments. She reached for her husband's hand, and he squeezed gently in return, pride sparkling in his dark eyes. Yet life on the reservation was not without trials. Weeks passed, and the season turned fierce. Sky-roaring winds swept dust across the land, scorching the crops in their fields. The spring that had blessed their union retreated to a trickle, forcing the women to walk miles for water. Tensions rose among the people, fear of hunger sharpening tempers like obsidian knives. Yazi watched her husband as he stood at the edge of a parched valley, sweat glistening on his brow, jaw set in fierce determination. He rallied the hunters to track game farther than before, led the farmers to dig deeper wells, and comforted the children who cried for clean water. Yazi wanted to stand beside him, but each attempt to help left her feeling clumsy. Her city-bred hands did not know how to coax life from cracked earth. Frustration welled in her chest like a storm. One evening she slipped away from their small hogan and crossed the plateau alone, her dress catching on thorny brush until she paused, tears burning behind her eyelids. "I am useless here," she whispered to the dusk. Then the warrior's voice came behind her, soft but insistent. He took her hand, guiding her to a circle of stones where wild onions still sprouted defiantly. "This land needs more than muscle," he said gently. "It needs balance, heart, creativity." He held her gaze until her tears stilled. "Teach the women new ways to store water, gather roots for healing salves. Use what you know to bring what you've learned into our lives." Her chest swelled with hope as she realized that strength came in many forms. Together they returned to the elder's shelter, where she learned to distill mountain herbs into poultices, to fashion simple rain catchers from hides, and to weave patterns of hope into blankets sold at the trading post for much-needed supplies. Each success sparked a new fire within her, reminding her that adaptation was its own kind of bravery. Months turned into seasons. The rains returned with gentle taps on their rooftops, the spring revived, and the fields bloomed once more. Yazi's confidence grew as she stood beside her husband, addressing the council of elders, proposing innovations to sustain their people. He watched her from a place of pride, the warrior who had found his bride and transformed her fear into purpose. Through it all, they faced deeper challenges beyond the land's needs. Some among the tribe questioned the union, a stranger from another world binding herself to a Navajo warrior under ancient oaths. Gossip drifted like tumbleweed. Whispers sought to erode the foundation of their love. One night, Yazi overheard the harshest words at the well. "She'll never understand our ways." Rage and doubt warred within her until he found her, eyes red, leaning on the well's edge. He washed her tears with cool water and held her close. "Our love was forged before dawn," he murmured. "It was tested by fire and water and every breath since. Let no words break what the ancestors bound." In his embrace, she rediscovered her own strength, how deeply she had come to know this land, its spirit now woven into her soul. Time did more than heal, it transformed. Yazi, once the abandoned stranger, became a teacher, a healer, a voice of vision alongside her warrior husband. He, once a solitary defender, blossomed into the leader who bridged past and future. Together they bore children whose laughter carried the warmth of two worlds intertwined, skin kissed by sun and sky, eyes bright with promise. Years later, when the elder lay upon her final bed of woven reeds, Yazi and her husband knelt at her side. She placed a hand on each of theirs, blessing them one last time. "You have shown our people that love transcends any boundary," she whispered. "Your union is the song that will carry us forward." Under starlit skies, they returned to the place of their first ceremony, hearts heavy with loss, yet filled with reverence. The wind stirred the juniper needles, and Yazi let its song remind her of the night she first awoke in his huan, fear turning to hope in a single heartbeat. Her husband gathered her close, and together they offered tobacco to the ancestors, gratitude in every plume of smoke. Their story, born before dawn, shaped by hardship, sustained by compassion, had become legend among their people, a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places And that true strength lies not just in the arm that wields a weapon, but in the heart that chooses to protect, to nurture, to forgive. And so they walked forward, hand in hand, two warriors of spirit and flesh, carving a path of unity and understanding that would outlast their days, echoing in the canyon winds for generations to come. Proof that an abandoned bride found in the half-light of fear could blossom into the mother of a new dawn, and that a Navajo warrior's greatest battle was won when he dared to love. They named their first daughter Sani, the Little One, because she arrived with the soft light of dawn, her cry a fresh wind through the hogan. Yaji held her close at birth, feeling the weight of hope cocooned in her tiny frame. The warrior brushed his fingertips across the child's cheek, whispering a vow. I will teach you the songs of the earth, little one, and you will teach me the promise of new beginnings. As Sani grew, her laughter became their daily blessing. She darted among the pinon pines, her eyes bright with curiosity. Yazi showed her how to coax water from silver sage, while her father taught her how to track the deer by footprints hidden in soft soil. Under their care, she learned that life required both gentleness and strength, a lesson passed down from mother and father alike. But the world beyond their settlement was changing. Traders brought new goods and foreign voices. A railroad stretched its iron spine across the horizon, promising prosperity to some and threatening the sanctity of their lands to others. One autumn day, a delegation of officials arrived, their polished boots scuffing the red dirt, maps unfurled on folding tables, voices laced with unfamiliar words about progress and boundaries. The Council of Elders met under the great juniper, the very one where Yazi and her husband had sealed their union. Yazi sat among the women, her arms around Sani, who clung to her mother's skirt. The warrior stood beside the elders, holding a carved staff that bore the image of the hog and hearth and the braided hair of a bride. Their voices were calm but firm as they listened to offers of trade, promises of schools, and veiled threats of displacement. Later, as dusk painted the sky in copper and violet, the warrior and Yazi walked the mesa's edge, silence between them heavy with unspoken fears. He spoke first, voice low and steady. They offer education for our children, but at the cost of our customs. They promise roads, but roads bring strangers who do not honor the land. Yazi pressed her daughter close. I want Sani to learn, to grow beyond what we know, but not if it means losing the songs that cradle her soul. He turned to her, eyes reflecting the twilight. Then we must choose how to guide her path. We can accept what benefits us and reject what harms. His words, drawn from his people's wisdom, steadied her heart. Together they proposed a solution, a school taught by their own who had learned in distant cities, returning home not to abandon tradition, but to bridge worlds. The officials hesitated, then agreed to fund a simple schoolhouse, built with timber from the nearby canyon, its walls left unpainted, its windows wide to welcome the wind. When the building stood at last, Yazi taught the girls to weave stories into blankets that lined its floors, while the warrior taught the boys archery and the value of restraint. Sani, with her mother's quick wit and her father's steady hands, learned to read and to recite ancient chants, her voice unfurling across the room like budding petals. As seasons turned, the school became a place of gathering, children from neighboring clans arriving at dawn, wild with energy, their laughter a chorus of new possibilities. Yazi stood at the doorway one morning, arms crossed over her chest, watching her daughter guide a circle of small hands in a dance older than any written word. Pride swelled within her breast, for she saw in Sani the union of two worlds made whole. But progress bore its own trials. With increased travel came diseases unknown to their people. A harsh winter clutched the reservation, and soon coughs and fevers echoed through the hogans. Yazi rose before the sun each day, preparing herbal broths and poultices, her mother's teachings guiding her hands. The warrior patrolled the perimeter, ensuring supplies, corn, beans, squash, were shared fairly among struggling families. At night they knelt together before the fire, offering prayers for relief and for the strength to endure. Sani fell ill one night, her small body burning like embers under a fevered blanket. Yazi shivered in the cold glow of the hearth, wrapping her daughter in layers of woven wool. Across the room, her husband drummed his fingers on the wooden floor, willing the night to end. Through the long hours, they whispered words of comfort and of promise. "You are our dawn," they told her. "You will rise again." When dawn finally arrived, it found Sani clutching her mother's finger, eyes bright but weary. Relief flooded through Yazi as tears of gratitude streaked her cheeks. The warrior placed a hand on her shoulder, his silent strength a balm to her exhaustion. In that fragile moment, they understood anew the fragility and resilience of life, and how love could carry them through the darkest hours. Years rippled past, and Sani became a young woman strong as the cottonwood and graceful as moonlight on sand. She married a young hunter from a neighboring clan, and Yazi's heart brimmed with both joy and the pang of letting go. At the ceremony, held at the spring where Yazi and her husband had pledged themselves, she draped Sani in the blanket she had woven at birth. Its patterns a tapestry of memories, the night of discovery, the dawn vows, the first steps of their daughter. As she watched her child join two families, Yazi felt the circle complete and begin anew. Her husband stood at her side, pride and love shining in his gaze. She placed her hand on his, and in that seamless gesture lay the story of their journey. From the moment they met in half-light to the generations they had nurtured. From the trials that tested their resolve to the dreams they fulfilled together. The railroad still ran its iron lines beyond the mesas, but the tracks had become threads woven into their story, not lines that cut them off. Their children and grandchildren learned both ancient chants and modern letters, their laughter dancing between canyon walls and classroom halls. Yazi and her husband grew older, their hair touched by silver, their steps slower, but hearts ever intertwined. One evening, they sat outside their still-standing hoo-han, watching the sunset blaze across the horizon. She leaned against his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, the same arm that had first lifted her from fear. In the dying light, their hands found each other, fingers laced like woven fibers in a blanket of memories. "My love," she whispered, voice soft as dusk. "We have lived a life I never could have imagined when I awoke in the dark." He pressed a kiss to her temple, voice gravel and warmth. "And yet, you fit here as if you were born beneath these skies." They sat in silence, letting the wind carry their gratitude to the ancestors. The mesas stood sentinel, red and unyielding, as they had for countless seasons. The land was their witness, the hearth their heart, and their love the legacy that would endure in every dawn to come. And in that final glow of sunset, they knew their story was not an end, but an evergreen song, echoing through their descendants, through the canyons and high deserts, carried on the wind, forever reminding the world that love can blossom even in the most unlikely soil, and that a warrior's greatest triumph is found when he opens his hugin and his heart to a stranger, binding two souls before the sun even rises. As the years wove on, Yazi and her husband stood at the threshold of their life together, more certain than ever that love, once a fragile spark in the dark, had become an unquenchable flame, guiding not only their path, but the paths of all who followed them. Their children, and then grandchildren, grew under a sky that carried both the weight of history and the promise of tomorrow. They watched as Sani's daughters learned the old chants at dusk, voices rising in harmony with cicada's song, and then practiced new poems penned in English when the teachers from the reservation school came to visit. Their home, once just a lone hughan on the mesa, had become a gathering place, a hearth that welcomed travelers seeking both counsel and comfort. Families returned to find seats at their table, relief in their laughter, and the certainty that kindness, once sown, would yield harvests of hope. With each passing season, Yazi and her husband embarked on journeys beyond their tribal lands, to the nearest town where trains hissed like restless serpents, to state capitals where laws that governed their people were decided, to conferences where they spoke as equals, urging respect for treaties and traditions. He wore his warrior's pride as armor in dusty council rooms. She carried her mother's compassion like a torch in halls lit by electric light. Together they forged alliances with other nations, weaving a tapestry of voices that insisted modernity need not trample heritage. Yet even as they spoke on platforms of progress, they never forgot the small moments that had defined them. At dawn, long after their hair had silvered, they still rose to tend the spring that had blessed their union. He built new channels and flumes to nourish younger hands learning irrigation. She grew healing gardens and taught apprentices to listen to each plant's whisper. Under the same sky where she had first awakened in fear, she now woke wrapped in the warmth of belonging. Their greatest test arrived in a season of drought that stretched across the southwest like a silent siege. Springs shrank to puddles, and forests crackled under sun's relentless glare. Many families faced hunger. Younger generations wondered if the land they loved could sustain them. Yazi and her husband answered the crisis not by retreating into sorrow, but by leading an initiative to restore ancient water harnessing techniques. They gathered elders who remembered hand-carved canals from centuries past, engineers who studied the land with new tools, and young volunteers eager to serve. Together, they mapped the mesas, cleared silted waterways, and rebuilt stone cisterns that caught every precious drop when rain finally fell. For months, they labored side by side with kin and stranger alike, hands blistered under the sun, hearts united by a single goal, to ensure a future where children could still hear the water's song. When at last dark clouds gathered and rain trumpeted its arrival, the fields drank deeply, and the restored springs gurgled like laughter. The reservation rejoiced, not simply at relief from thirst, but at the triumph of unity, perseverance, and the wisdom passed down from ancestors. Yazi stood in the deluge, face lifted to the sky, tears mingling with raindrops as her husband joined her with arms outstretched. In that moment, the land itself seemed to embrace them, acknowledging the love that had first bound them before dawn. In the quiet that followed the storm, they walked to the old juniper where their union had been celebrated and knelt together, offering tobacco and gratitude. Around them, grandchildren chased frogs in newly revived pools, while elders told stories of how a stranger bride and a warrior had shaped a destiny larger than themselves. Their laughter and voices rose in celebration, carrying the couple's legacy on the wind. In their final years, Yazi and her husband often sat side by side on a carved bench by the spring, hands entwined like braids of willow. She would recount the terror and wonder of waking in a stranger's home, the fear that threatened to consume her, and the single heartbeat that had offered her a new life. He would recall the fierce protectiveness that had compelled him to act, the moment he saw not a trespasser, but a soul in need, and the vow he whispered before dawn's first light. They spoke little of endings. Instead, they celebrated continuity. Their hearts beat in time with the seasons, and they saw themselves in the circle of life that turned ever onward. When the time came for them to join the ancestors, they passed gently, him breathing his final prayer into the dawn air, her lips curved in the peaceful knowledge that their love would endure wherever new suns rose. Their children and grandchildren carried them forward. The school they had helped found grew into a cultural center where Navajo language and art were taught alongside math and science. Water restoration crews named one of the main canals Yazi's Ribbon, and the staff at the state capitol installed a plaque honoring the warrior whose diplomacy had kept the reservation intact during the railroad's advance. But their true monument was the spirit they instilled, that love need not be bound by origin, that courage could be born in a single act of compassion, and that two people joined before dawn could reshape the destiny of a people. They taught their descendants that every hoop of the Haugan, every cord in a chan, every drop of water sustained by human hands was a testament to what one warrior and one bride had dared to build together. On quiet evenings, when the sky turned pink as healing wounds, you can still hear their story carried on the wind. The tale of a Navajo warrior who found an abandoned bride sleeping in his hughan, and who, before the sun had fully risen, married her beneath a sky of endless possibility. Their legacy lives in every blade of grass that springs from parched earth, in every child taught to honor both past and future, and in every heart that knows the power of choosing love, before dawn, after dawn, for all dawns to come.